Hi viewers and welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at how to create this form in the Curves workbench. We're also going to be looking at another video in the future where we're going to be creating something like this. These are two Curve workbench forms that I've been working with over the last couple of days. I'm going to be putting tutorials together for both of these. This first tutorial will be concentrating on this one, and as you can see, we've got this similar waveform going through, like a sine wave going around the outside. I can change this as well. So if I come into the extrude that's sitting on the bottom down here, we can see we've got the extrude here. And if I change this, and let's pull this inwards a bit. So let's say somewhere in here, and close that. You can see it's transformed inwards, but we've got a little bit of a problem, so let's quickly fix that. And that's only because we haven't got any construction geometry in here, so I can quickly bring in some geometry, and let's line this up, and you can see how this lines up. This is off, so this is our top curve, and this is slightly off, so we just attach that to here, the point on line constraint, and turn this to construction geometry and hit close. And we just let that compute. There we go, that's computed now. You can see that sketch is sitting there. Let's just hide that sketch. And we can take this further. We can even change this curve here. Let's take off the tangency here and attach this point to this one. And we can pull this in and change this to how we want. We have to be careful of the tangency at the top. Let's hit close. And there we have the alter shape. So you can see we've got a different curve running all the way through there. We'll keep the tangency growing across the top. And everything is in order. So let's have a look how we do this, and then in another video we'll look at this shape as well and how you would actually create something like this. Totally different technique, but we're still using the Curves workbench to create a similar form. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. For this tutorial, we're going to be creating a new document, and we're going to be using something called the Curves workbench. So come over to Tools, Add-on Manager, and we can install the Curves workbench from here. We can use the filter, type in curves, and we want the Curves workbench, not the curve shape, this one here. When you install it, FreeCAD will reopen and you can start using the tool. So create a new document, and I'm going to start in the sketcher. The reason why I'm starting the sketcher is that we need two circles that we're going to loft between. We're going to create a ruled loft between those, and this is going to hold the curve of our object. You use the XY plane and hit OK. I'm going to use not the circle but the arc, and this is going to be the center endpoint arc. The reason being is that we need 4 edges. So come up, use the center, come up, click. We've got the auto constraints on, you avoid redundant auto constraints. And we're looking to attach each of these arcs to the horizontal and vertical line. So I'm going to auto constrain on top of that point and come around and attach to this line. Do the same, center, auto constrain onto the point, round and attach, and last of all, center, auto constraint to the point, and final auto constraint to the top point. We've got a redundant constraint in there, probably because we've got the point on line constraints. Hit delete. We can see if they're all attached by moving these up and down, and we just make some amendments to attach these. Let's set some diameter. We can set that to 80. Now we're closed, we've made our first circle. I'm going to duplicate that, come out to edit and duplicate selection and move this upwards using the placement and the position, and we'll move it up about 60 millimeters. I'm not too bothered about scale, we're just using this to show the technique. The reason why I've duplicated this is because we got to keep these edges in line, because when we loft across here, we want these in line so we don't get any twisting. So this top sketch, I'm going to double click it and just change the size to 100. So we flare out at the top. Let's create our loft. Come into the part and create a loft between those using the part and loft. We've only got 2 sketches and it's a ruled loft, so there's only one sequence they can go in, well, top to bottom or bottom to top. And we just double click each of these sketches to add them and make sure it's a solid and hit OK. Okay, come into this loft and just hide both of these sketches. So select them both, press the spacebar. We now got our loft and we've got the individual faces along here. For the object, you'll notice that we have curves that come down and sweep up and they're tangent to each other. So that means that they'll be connected up to this top rim, run tangent, and we get a smooth transition like a sine wave across this surface. So this is just going to be the surface that holds the curves. To allow us to do this, we'll use the curves workbench over in the curves, and we're going to be using this tool, sketch on surface. So the first thing we need to do is click on a surface and use the tool from the toolbar, or come down to surfaces and sketch on surface. We now got a new icon on the left hand side in our tree view. If we open this up, you'll see a map sketch. Now if I double click on that map sketch, what we'll normally get is a rectangle that's unraveled this surface flat. But this won't unravel to a rectangle. So we'll get this sliver sitting here. So we need to transfer the longest edge from the top or the bottom, depending on which one's the longest edge, to our measurement here. We've got the correct measurement going down this way, so you can see that there, but we haven't got either the top and bottom. So we need a length from this edge. We can only do that from our original model, not in the sketch. And the curves workbench allows us to take information out from our model. And it's this tool here, the GM info. If I click that tool, we can come down and select this edge. And it tells us that the length is 78.54. We come over to our map sketch, double click it, and we come up to the top measurement and transfer that into here, 78.54, and hit OK. We've now got our sketch set up. Let's hit close and save. Now we're saved, let's come over to the map sketch and start creating our geometry in here. Come over to the model and hide the loft. So now we've got our sketch in front of us. I'm going to just create an S here to allow for this tangent sine wave to go right the way around our model. To do that, I'm going to divide this into 2 with a line. And make sure this has symmetry across here. So click on this line and these 2 points and use the symmetry constraint. We go into over constraint, let's come into the task and hit the redundant constraint and delete it. And that's in the center now. So make sure that's construction geometry by clicking on it, come out to the sketch, come down to sketch geometries and use toggle construction geometry. So this is blue now. All the outside lines should be blue as well, and that's important. That needs to be kept blue. Otherwise this won't work. Let's make a line in here to hold the tangency of the bottom. So we can use a line in here. There is another way to do this, and that's allow the arc's center points to rest upon these lines. So that line's in there. Let's make that construction geometry. This time I'm going to use a toolbar. And we've got that line in there. And we can start adding our endpoint and rim point arcs to create our S. So I'm going to use this point here and create our first arc, and then use this point here, let's zoom in a bit, and create our second arc and attach it to this line, like so. I'm going to create some tangency across these two by clicking both of those and using the tangent tool. Get substitution, which is fine, it's okay that. We'll get this tangency now. Now if I take this arc and this line and make those tangent, we can see we get this nice tangency running through here. Let's hit OK. Got to make sure that this point is on this line as well. The point on line constraint. You can see the tangency is the same as placing this point on this line as well. And you'll see that with this top. If I take this arc here and use this top line and use the tangency, okay, that we get that tangency there. And you can see that line and that point are in line as well. We'll adjust this to what we want, something like that. And you can see if we take this arc and reflect it over to this side, we get a tangency across here, and we don't get a pointy arc at this point or this point. And this is what we want. We can constrain this down if we want, but I'm going to leave it as it is. Let's hit close. We now get this arc. Now if I bring back the loft, you can see how that arc is placed upon here. When this is mirrored over this side, it will follow this tangency. And if we mirror both of these across these faces, then you see how this runs around here with nice tangency across those arcs with a nice flow. Now we've done that, what we're going to do is create the bottom sketch. Now this is important because we're going to blend this arc to the bottom sketch. You can see we've just done one arc at the moment. So we've got this one arc object with basically the two arcs within there. We're going to make this so we have a hole in the center. So it's going to be basically a thickness that runs around here. We're not going to use this loft. This is just to hold the arcs. To do that, we basically need a sketch with an inner and outer surface that are closed. So that's our next task, is to make that sketch. We don't need that for this. We're going to show you how to do that in a moment. So to make that sketch, we're going to come over to the sketcher. And I'm going to click to make sure nothing's selected because we're going to place it upon one of the normal planes. So create a sketch, XY plane, hit OK. Let's hide this loft and see what we have. We can see we've got the curve over here. We're going to be using this to create some reference geometry against. So let's pull in this geometry using the external geometry tool. I'm going to pull in these points, so the vertices of each of the arcs. And you can see how they lay across there. We're going to use those to marry out the edges against this arc. So I'm going to use the line tool and create lines in here. Like so. So now those lines are in there. Let's create our arcs. So center an endpoint arc and come out from the center point, come across, point on line constraints, and bring this around, point on line constraint here. It's one arc, and do the same. Coincident constraints that point, and come round and point on line constraint here. So for the first arc, let's make our next one. Like so. So we've got those in there. Now we can trim away these arcs. And this will create the edges that we need. So using the trim tool, trim the tops, and then trim the bottoms. And we don't need this one in here, this one, so trim that one away. So we get faces that marry up with this arc here. We don't want to attach these points here because when we start affecting this arc, this will move, and also will move this object. It may distort it. We may need to have to come in and change this about if we start moving this or changing this arc in certain ways. Now's the time to get an idea of how thick we want these walls. And I'm going to go for a 3mm width in here. And the same for this one. So taking these two, making those equal. And also make sure that if I zoom in, I can see these 2 points are separated. So those aren't joined together. So I'm going to take these 2 points and connect them with coincident constraint. Just delete the redundant constraint. So now we've got those constraints in there. We can constrain this right down, but I'm just going to leave it for the time being, just for speed. Hit close. So we have the arc and our bottom piece. So you can see we've got this edge here and this edge, which we're going to blend to. Let's come back over to the curve workbench and just uncheck that geom info there. For us to blend these arcs, we need faces and edges. At the moment, we've only got edges, so we need faces. To do that, come over to the sketch on surface and we'll come down and we're looking at thickness. We're using 3mm across here, so we're going to use 3mm across this one as well. And that's create a thickness there. We're also going to create a thickness on this side as well. To do that, we come over to the part workbench and click on our sketch and use a simple extrude of around 3mm as well. So keeping it the same. We still need a face on this side because we've got a face and an edge, but we've only got one surface here. So we've got a surface and a solid. And I want to basically take this face, this edge, and connect it up with a face that will be here in this edge to make a curve between these two. So I need a way of creating thickness between here, and we're going to use a 3D offset for that. So click on the sketch on surface and come up to this tool here, or come up to part and come over to 3D offset. You can see how that's offset there, and change this to 3mm. So we've got 3mm offset and fill the offset and hit OK. We now got the edges and the faces that we need for surfacing, and that's our next job. So now we can start blending the surfaces together. I'm going to be using the curves workbench, and we're going to be using the tool, the blend surface. Also available from surfaces, and we come down to the blend surface. To blend them, we need to pick the edges that we need and the surface and the faces to guide that surface. So if I hover over this one, we can see we've got a zebra kind of effect here, and this is because we've got our sketch on surface still available. Let's press the space bar and hide that because that's going to cause us some issues. I want to connect the top of this surface to this object. To do that, we click the surface, control click the edge. Let's come down and around and look at the back edge of the other object. Control click the edge and control click the surface. Let's come up and use the tool, the blend surface. That's blended between those. Let's repeat on this side. Click the surface, control click the edge, control click the edge, and then control click the surface. So we're going from surface to edge and then down. First one we get to is the edge and then the surface. And blend. Now we've got the back down. Let's have a look at the front. Come around to this side and we do the same. Looking here, we've got the surface, control click the edge, and come down, control click the edge, and click the surface, and use the blend tool. And last of all, surface, edge, come around, edge, surface, and blend together. We've now got those all blended. Press the space bar on that original offset, you can see what's happened. Let's do the same for this one down here. So we've got these two blend surfaces. We need to close these, the front of these, because at the moment all we've got is extrude as the guidance and the offset as the guidance. Now there are a number of ways of doing this. For instance, we could make a ruled surface against these two edges by coming over to the part and clicking one, and then control clicking the other, making the ruled surface, like so. Do the same for this one. So that's one way. The other way is to use the original object. So we have the extrude here, and we have a face that we can actually attach to here. That would require us coming over to the draft workbench and using the face binder. For the time being, I'm just going to keep to the ruled surface. So I'm just going to hide that and click these two edges, create the ruled surface, and then click these two. Control click both of those and ruled surface. At the moment our object is still a shell because we haven't closed it yet. So we still need to close here. Again, we're going to use a ruled surface. So click one, control click the other edge between those two surfaces and use a ruled, and the same again on the other side. This edge and this edge, and close those together. Now we can create this as a solid and carry on with our mirroring and arraying of the object. To do that, I'm going to come over to the curves workbench again. I'm going to be using this button here, the parametric solid. And to use that, we take each of these surfaces, the ruled and the blends that are inside the ruled surface. So what will happen is once we control click all of these, and you see we can't select those because they've already been selected up here, so we just carry on. You can select these from the screen as well, control clicking, going around the object. So those are all selected. That's create the parametric solid or the MISC parametric solid on the menu. You see that we have a green solid here. That's everything from the screen compounded together into a solid. So we're going to do the mirroring now, and we need to mirror across this plane here. So let's come around and have a look. So we want to mirror across here. So let's come over to the part workbench and use part mirroring and mirror across the XZ plane and hit OK. We've now mirrored across that plane. And we're fusing these together so we can take this solid and this solid mirror and create a fusion with those. Now those are fusion together, let's come over to the array tools on the draft workbench and create our final array. So in the draft workbench, I'm just going to show you the grid, show you where this sits. Click the fusion, come up to the modifications, array tools, and polar array. Set the number of elements to 4 and reset the center of rotation and hit OK. We've now created an array of that object. And finally, we can produce the solid by coming back to the curves workbench. Let's hide that grid and come back to the curves workbench. Click the array and click the solid. At the moment, you can see it's come back as a compound. Let's delete that solid and come back into the array. So we've got options to fuse here. So let's drop this down, hit true, and click off. Now when we click the array and use the solid, we now get a solid object. We now have our finished object. So in the next video on the subject, we'll be creating this one, again in the curves workbench, but this time we're going to be using a different method. Now you notice that I haven't got a curve on the surface. Instead, I'm using a freehand B-spline and some interesting sketches, as you can see here, this square here, and another one, if I can find it. So So we've got one down the bottom as well. And you can see as I take these away, we're starting to reveal the object underneath. So this is another way of doing this. Produces a different effect, but we're still using the cursed workbench to create the object. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you again soon. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.